planet are you today?
I'm in New York City in Brooklyn. Yeah.
How's things in New York? I see you had a bit of some weather through the weekend there.
Yeah. The weather passed, but we were supposed to get a hurricane here.
Right.
And we were sort of expecting a lot worse. We were expecting a really heavy surge,
Yeah.
but luckily the storm kind of shifted in the ocean and it hit us, but it didn't hit us as hard. So, which
Yep.
was good.
But just in time to cancel that big concert in Central Park.
Yeah, right.
It's kind of a bummer.
I think they're going to reschedule.
I hope so. Yeah. I was looking forward to some of that. Anyway, you've got your album coming out on Friday. How are you feeling about releasing it under these circumstances, whatever they may be for you?
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, it's so strange that I thought the planning of everything, I thought, oh, great, it's cool, it's all done and the summer will be coming to a close here, and things will be sort of back to normal, and
Whatever
of course
that is.
yeah, so of course that's not the case, but yeah, I don't know. I'm ready for this album to come out. I get really antsy. I think
Right.
I don't like to sit on things for very long. And I'm always kind of forging ahead. So I'm happy for people to hear it.
Right.
That's kind of the most important part. And I just want to be as safe as possible. We canceled a few events. I had a record release sort of residency at a club in Los Angeles next month. And obviously we're just going to wait. We're going to, because it was assembling too many musicians, and we had DJs and 200 people a night, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So unfortunately we had to just cancel it, which is fine. And I have some tours booked, but it's not until for another month and a half. So we're kind of hoping things level out a little bit. And
Gotcha. Yep.
This can be busy, but I'm happy. I'm happy to let it go into the world. I think if people can use it, to their benefit, and if it gives them any kind of sort of comfort, then I'm thrilled with that.
Right. Well, I think I read somewhere where the album is kind of described as having a healing focus to it. So maybe you can elaborate on that.
It certainly does. I mean, I wrote it. The idea for the album came to me before all of this stuff unfolded.
Right.
But the real work that I did on it was during a really hard, heavy lockdown. And
right.
In the beginning, it was quite difficult, obviously, for everyone. But personally, just for things I had all of this stuff booked. I had tours, and I had, this album, for instance, the session got wiped away and rebooked, of course, but suddenly I thought, like, oh no, like everything's gone. What do I do? I was sort of, the mechanics of my life have revolved around gigs and tours and album cycles and all this stuff. And then it was this hard stop, and I couldn't quantify it in my mind, and I also just, some friends that were living close to me were going through some really tough times. Everyone was having reckonings in both directions,
Right. Yeah.
So I kind of gathered myself and found a way to deal. And I was sort of felt myself, there was no other way out, I suppose.
Right.
I really embraced the time, and I came to realize that I really did need a break, and I really needed to just step out of my busy schedule and just take it easy, and I really worked on that. And I worked on my personal things,
right.
My health, try to be as healthy as possible, and music became the focus. This album was my focus, but it coincided with all of this stuff, which a lot of it was happening in real time. So I was trying to make sense of what was going on, and music was the one thing that was grounding me. And I have a little studio here in my apartment, and I also have a rehearsal space that's a few miles from here. So I was just toggling back and forth every day and just playing and feeling, kind of letting a lot of stuff go and just feeling comfortable and just playing a ton. And I was writing a lot.
Right.
I had my little sanctuaries up on my roof and in the parks. So I was sort of just like kind of in this orbit and always listening and writing and tinkering around and working on demos. And yeah, I think really I wouldn't have been able to do it if I was in a different headspace or a different momentum. My focus became very acute, and
Gotcha.
For me, it was a very rewarding way to work on a record because I had tons of time, and
right.
I felt, and I felt like I had a lot to explore, really.
Yeah. So you recorded ultimately in Los Angeles, is that right?
Yeah. That was a plan that I've been thinking about for years, and I've been wanting to work with this one engineer named Rob Schnapp.
Right.
And we were in touch over a span of a few years, and finally everything aligned itself with my label and with Rob's schedule and my schedule, and I started writing the songs, so it all sort of made sense for us to work together. And of course,
what was it about him that you wanted to work with? What drew you to him?
He had worked with some friends of mine. He worked originally. I first discovered him through the music of Elliott Smith.
Right.
And when I really came to like Elliott's music when I was a young guy, and I learned about Rob and his studio then, and then fast forward a bunch of years, some friends of mine worked with him. My friend Kurt Vile recorded with him quite a bit. And I ended up meeting him, and we kind of got along. And I love going to studios. I love checking out recording studios and just seeing what people have. And Rob's studio was so inviting and so cozy. And he had just the coolest guitars, and it wasn't flashy. And he has this incredible pedigree and history of recording music. His father was an engineer in New York City, and he worked with Phil Spector, and he kind of like learned all this stuff from him. And then Rob moved to LA and worked at Sunset Sound for a long time, and he just is like the recording is just like part of his DNA.
Gotcha.
He's a master, and he's also very humble. And he's such a great crafter of songs. He can really glue them together. And it was perfect for myself and my friend who I made the record with, really, my friend Justin.
He was the next guy I was going to ask you about. So there you go.
Yeah, Justin is an old friend of mine, music companion. We kind of grew up together in Philadelphia. He's living in LA, and I'm here in New York. So I was sending him all my demos, and he knows me so well that he can kind of be critical, and he kind of knows my formulas as well. Like I have about 6 or 7 different pockets that I fall in.
At least it's a varied, it's not just one or two.
Yeah. Maybe there's 1 or 2 primary ones. And then
gotcha.
He was trying to kind of push me out of my comfort zone.
Right.
And to try different stuff. We were talking a lot about music and sending each other records that we love and trying to kind of like sort of incite inspiration.
What kind of records did you send each other?
We were sending each other all kinds of stuff. We made like a playlist, and it kind of built up to this like 8-hour playlist. But I was listening to I got really into a lot of Brazilian music. And I was listening to tons of different records and picking songs out and sending them to him. And we would talk about arrangements. And he was listening to a lot of kind of almost modern progressive stuff that I wasn't really aware of, but really dug. And a lot of the stuff was more song structure and sound, and he's really a master at electronic music and synthesizers.
Right,
So
right.
he's sending me soundtracks and different bits of experimental music and all kinds of stuff that I didn't really know. So we were kind of exchanging, and then also like classic stuff, just stuff from the 70s and 60s that we're like, listen to this drum sound or bass sound, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think from some of the stuff that I've read that your album Way Out Weather was kind of integral to this record. How did that work?
Well, that's a good question, because that's the record that I made with Justin.
Right.
And I hadn't really worked with him since. And I like is that a Velvet Underground mug?
Yes, it is.
Wow, very cool.
But of course, they're wearing beach gear.
Amazing. That's so cool.
I've always wanted to see John Cale with a beach shirt on, but there you go.
I made that record with Justin, and the reason why I wanted to make this new one with him, for many reasons, but one of the reasons was that session was so special, right? Because, I mean, this is a long time ago, but we had no inhibitions. We didn't even really know what we were doing, but like there was this freedom in the studio, and all of the gear was set up, and we made the record in 5 days. It was done, and it just had this really kind of confident and open flow to it. And right. I think after that, I was going into fancier studios and playing with like really amazing musicians, and I felt I kind of wanted to get back to that place that we were at when we made that record, and just to feel no pressure, and just I really wanted to be myself and explore things in a very kind of personal way.
Right.
And
right.
Because he knows me so well, he can kind of, and I trust him as well. There's a level of trust there. He can kind of like tell me, because a lot of times I would send him demos and then I would redo them. And he would always be like, no, like you got to go back.
Pardon me.
You got to go back to the way that you were singing it the first time you sent it to me. Because I wasn't overthinking it, and he really helped me with like singing melodically and just, I guess, for like the sake of the song kinds of like ideas, where he's like, don't just do, he simplified things for me in ways. So it was he's a really good person to bounce ideas off of.
Gotcha. So the songs themselves, were they kind of written as a whole? Like, were you thinking in terms of writing an album, or were they just kind of around?
Yeah, I was thinking specifically of writing a record, and I that's when I often just have to put these sort of confines on myself, like, okay, I'm going to start working on a record,
right?
And then I start sort of thinking about themes and ideas and start gathering. I'm constantly playing, and I'm recording little tidbits of things here and there. But when I start thinking about a record, I start gathering everything and putting it out and like seeing where things lay and that kind of thing. It gives me a goal to sort of work towards. So when I started talking to Justin, I already had maybe 1 or 2 songs written, and then we really kind of like started. And so song by song, we were really working on things. And then when I felt comfortable enough that was done, and I didn't want to like dig it into the ground too much, put it away. And then sort of by the end, before we even started, we kind of had almost the record sort of mapped out with the demos. And we knew I think is also because of how much time we had, we came up with a plan. And I had never really done that before.
Nice to have a plan.
Yeah, it was almost sort of like I wouldn't say it was fully realized, but we had it was the first time where I felt like I had too much material.
Gotcha.
I was always like, oh, I'm a song short. Let's do a fun one and
right.
mess around.
Yeah.
Like
there's been a couple of songs that have been released, and the album is comprised of 11 tracks. Is there one if somebody asked you as a representative of the album that you would come to your mind first?
Yeah, I sort of change my thoughts on the songs, that I kind of go from one to the next. But one of the songs that I feel like is very different is the song Reflection.
Reflection,
where it's me really kind of coming out of my normal formulas that I mentioned, 7 of them, and I was playing piano quite a bit during the time, and it was sort of a new thing for me, and trying to sing and play piano really opened me up, and that song Reflection was one where, I mean, the chords are very simple, but it pushed me into a different vocal range, and it just a different temperament.
Gotcha.
And that, to me, that kind of is like a representational of how I try to kind of step out of myself for the record.
Gotcha. Yeah. And although that track is followed by one called Sugar Kiss, which features Mary Latimer, I believe, playing harp. So you've got several people sitting in, Juliana Barwick and Bridget St. John. How do these people fit in with what the record says to you?
Justin and I were very careful with who we wanted to be involved, and I feel like everyone that we asked were people who we admire, and they were people who we were kind of giving them any, like, the liberty to do what and however they wanted to interpret the song.
Right.
And we weren't saying like, do this or do that, please, or we need you to do this real cool tone. We just said like, here are the songs, and if you hear something, if you feel inspired, try something. And the beauty of that, what was great about that was, because of the situation, because of the pandemic, we were just doing things remotely, and they had time to listen and try things, and they would send us ideas, and certain things were better than others, and we just when we felt like they really landed on it, they were like, okay, that's great. And Mary actually came to the studio at the very end of the recording session. She brought her harp in, and it was the first time that we had seen anyone. And it was the first time like Mary played harp somewhere else.
Right.
And it was this kind of amazing like night that we had, there.
And what did Juliana do on the record?
She did a lot of textural stuff, like a synthesizer. But she did some really amazing vocal tracks that are very atmospheric. And Bridget St. John is someone who I've known for a long time and have admired, and I just love her older albums. And she lives here in New York City and still plays and sings beautifully, and she's gonna be 75 in October. And she just like has been around. She's like friends. She was around some of my musical heroes back in the 60s. Was friends with Nick Drake and John. Yeah. And has all the stories. Was this incredibly gentle, incredible performer and singer still. And so I asked her, hoping that she would want to do something, and she was really into the idea. Yeah.
One track that I was hoping to just touch on briefly, The Painter, which is beautifully produced and played, and
thank you.
A little Spanish guitar in there somewhere, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about the song?
Past the open window, slowly count the days,
that it's interesting that you said the Spanish guitar, because I was playing a lot of Spanish guitar.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, and classical guitar, and it was a new thing for me. Strangely enough, I'd never really played classical guitar, and thankfully, right before the pandemic. And I bought it specifically to work on this new record because I wanted to just try to find, I like trying to find inspiration with new instruments. And I also play fingerstyle on steel strings. So when I got the classical guitar, when I got it home, it just made so much sense. The fretboard's a lot wider, and the way that I could just play it, it just helped me figure out a more simplified way of writing songs. And I was started listening to Spanish guitar, Segovia, of course, but some of his contemporaries, and learning a little, like dabbling in like YouTube lessons and things like that. Sort of nerding out a little bit. So that song, The Painter, kind of came from that, and came from me just messing around with the certain structures on Spanish guitar.
Gotcha. Yeah. So you have a couple of like other projects that you work on as well. So what do you, once the record is out, what are you thinking about focusing on next?
Well, I made a record with a friend of mine who's a composer and pianist, and he has a project called Bing and Ruth, and he has music out on 4AD. And he and I kind of met through a friend, and we started composing these pieces. Speaking of Spanish guitar, it's just classical guitar and piano.
Right.
And so it's almost these sort of conversations that we were having, where he would come up with a piece, very simple, rhythmic, kind of like a building, minimal, almost meditative. And then I would kind of respond, and vice versa. I would come up with something and he would play with me on that. And it was just this really interesting, very open, this was all happening during the pandemic. So it was like very kind of like casual, but this deep kind of focus.
Right.
And so we created, I think, about 8 pieces, and we're hoping, I really love the music. It captures something about that time, and there's just this very kind of calming mood to it. It was very just sort of like soothing for us to do it, and very kind of a healing kind of project. So that's something I did that I'm excited about.
Cool.
And yeah, I'm doing like a live film score in October in Europe for some Stan Brakhage movies.
Okay.
And I've got some. I play a lot of improvised music as well, and I'm playing with some people here in New York, just kind of like little gigs here and there, with my friends. So I'm keeping busy. Yeah.
Keeping busy. Well, that's good. So I'm just curious, and it's kind of a question I should probably ask everybody. Over the course of the year, has everything that's happened politically and health-wise and all that changed you?
Yeah, I really think it has. I mean, I feel like I had time to learn more about just myself and how to take care of myself. And I'm kind of carrying with me some of the things that I tried to, I learned kind of how to undo a lot of habitual behavior and patterns of spiraling and just general anxiety. and so I'm kind of carrying and forging ahead with all of these things that I sort of delved into to find a better place within myself. And so it's certainly changed me. I mean, I'm obviously, with the conditions in the world, with, the anxiety of the climate, the global warming, and the storms that are happening, and the fires that are happening all the time, and and politically too. I mean, everyone is still, I think, having some sort of post-traumatic stress from our last president.
There is that, yes.
Yeah, obviously, luckily, thank God he's out of the picture. But I think that there's still a lot of carryover from that, and yeah, I don't know. It certainly has changed me, and I feel like I'm just learning. I'm constantly learning about myself and the conditions that I'm in.
Very good. Well, thank you for spending time talking to me about it.
Sure. Yeah,
hope everything goes well on Friday when the record comes out. It should be fun, huh?
Yeah, I'm excited.
It'll be different than the previous albums, I'm sure.
Yeah, no parties, no there's no I was thinking the last time my last album came out, we had this big party and there was like all this booze and people and dinner and celebratory. Now it's just I'll be home having some wine, hosting, which is fine.
Yes, exactly. Very good. Well, hopefully you can come back to New Zealand sometime. I know you've been before, so.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, it's one of my favorite places. So.
Very good. Well, thank you. Have a great day. And
you too.
See you later.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.